Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us tonight at our information session and Q&A about the draft Mosman Masterplan. My name is Jen Geis. I'm an Executive Director at Cred Consulting, and I'll be facilitating our session this evening. We're really grateful you're here to learn more, and we welcome your feedback on the approach and the options to help guide the finalisation of this incredibly important document for Mosman. We are recording tonight's session for those who can't join us and for yourselves to watch back again. So let's get started. To welcome us this evening is Mayor of Mosman, Councillor Anne-Marie Kimber.
Thank you and good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for your interest in this webinar this evening. I would like to start with a recognition of the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on this evening, which is the Borragagal and Camaragal people, and honour their enduring connection to country. Tonight's webinar is a part of an exciting and significant stage that we've reached in our master plan process. This master plan is a response to the state's low and medium rise housing controls. We know that one-size-fits-all planning has caused significant concern within our community, and we've consistently advocated on behalf of Mosman and worked collaboratively and constructively with the state government. Our sustained advocacy has been critical in securing agreement from the Minister to develop a strategic long-term master plan for Mosman, tailored to Mosman's unique circumstances, allowing our community to influence how density is applied locally. The master plan journey is incredibly extensive and complex. While we've been able to expedite this here in Mosman, the process, the number of components, expertise from our staff, consultants, stakeholders, and the community input is significant. And this comes alongside related concurrent projects around infrastructure, affordable housing, economics, and other important considerations. During tonight's presentation, you'll hear more about the steps in this process. We're in an early community consultation phase, and this session is designed to assist you in learning more about the master plan principles and potential options. After this webinar, we really encourage you to take part in our survey so that we can hear more specific feedback from you. And we also have some drop-in sessions, including tomorrow and Saturday at Allan Border Oval, drop-in sessions, and we're also going to record this session tonight, and that will be available on our website after tonight. I really encourage you to make your voices heard. Your input is so important because it will help shape this master plan, and it's really important that we hear from as many of you as possible. I know it's been an uncertain time for many in our community. I'm also aware that conversations are taking place between neighbours, families, real estate agents, property developers. Tonight you will get a better understanding of next steps and timing, including due process that needs to be followed by Council with a finalisation just a few months away. I want to thank you for your participation in this process. This early community consultation phase is about hearing your feedback on the master plan principles and potential options before a final plan will come back to community consultation down the track. Tonight, we'll hear from the council team and the consultants that are working with us. So now I'll hand over to Jen Geis from Cred Consulting, our facilitator for tonight's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So let me introduce you to the presenters and panellists with us this evening. So joining us in the studio tonight from Mosman Council are, of course, our Mayor, Councillor Anne-Marie Kimber. We have Craig Covich, General Manager of Mosman Council, Vivienne Albin, Director, Environment and Planning at Council, and Sarah Wallace, Team Coordinator, Urban Planning. Please say hello, Council team.
Good evening, Jen.
Also joining us this evening from SJB, who have been engaged to work with Council on the Master Plan, is Director Jonathan Knapp. Hi, Jonathan.
Evening, everybody.
And Associate Urban Designer Lulu Vittorelli. Hi, Lulu.
Good evening, everybody.
So I'd now like to hand over to Craig Covich, General Manager of Mosman Council, who's going to talk us through the agenda for this evening. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Jen. So we do have an agenda for this evening. So we'll spend about 10 minutes talking about the project background and context. And then we'll move on to sort of the master plan introduction. So we'll spend a fair bit of time looking at the options and bringing you back to sort of first principles to understand the foundations of why we're doing this and how we've come to the decisions we're coming to. That will be a mixture of council staff. So you'll hear from Vivienne, Sarah. You'll also hear from SJB, Jonathan and Lulu. After that, we'll have extensive time for Q&A. So we've given ourselves a good hour to answer questions from the panel, from the members who have put questions forward already. And we're anticipating a few questions will come as we speak. At the end, we'll wrap up, letting you know how to have your say further. And Vivienne will go through what we will like to see in terms of more submissions. And we'll put a QR code up at the end to make sure you have access to that link.
Great, thanks, Craig. So before we begin our presentations, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping things for the webinar tonight. As Craig explained, the Q&A will be at the end of the session. So thanks to those of you who have already pre-submitted questions with your registration to the webinar. We will work through those pre-submitted questions first, and then we'll open up to your live questions tonight, because we believe that some of those pre-submitted questions are really commonly asked questions. We're hearing them already throughout the community. To submit your questions live this evening, please use the Q&A button that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. If you can't see it, find the More button with the 3 dots, click on that, and you'll find the Q&A button hiding in there. So questions are submitted through the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. Tonight, we won't be answering questions relating to individual sites. If you do have questions relating to specific sites, please attend one of our drop-in sessions over the coming days. We will pop up the dates for you at the end of this session, so you can align that with your calendar. Come and have a conversation with the project team. Should you need to, you can turn on closed captioning using the CC button in your Zoom toolbar, and you can also find other accessibility features in the Zoom settings if you require. Okay, I'm going to now hand over to Vivienne Albin, Director of Environment and Planning at Mosman Council, who's going to provide some background and context about the Mosman Masterplan. Thanks, Vivienne.
Thanks very much, Jen. And I'm so glad you're all here tonight. Thank you very much for attending. I'll just start off by talking about our role in Sydney's growth. We all know that there's a housing shortage in Sydney, and Mosman Council is committed to playing their part in providing homes for the state of New South Wales. New South Wales government has put out many policies to try and facilitate and be catalysts to the delivery of housing. Now, the low and mid-rise housing policy that the Mayor referred to previously this evening, that's one such policy, and that's one that applies to Mosman. Now, the LMR policy is a broad brush policy. It excludes the commercially zoned areas, and it's also one that isn't place-based. It really has sparked quite a rush of developer interest in Mosman, but also a lot of community concern. Now, the concerns around things that, it is a one-size-fits-all approach, but does that fit all of Mosman? Could it have been a more nuanced policy? So we absolutely agree with providing more housing, and that's what we're working towards. But we want to actually provide housing in places that maintains local character. And we also want to plan for the infrastructure needs of the population coming in. So I'll just go over to the next slide, if you don't mind, Jen, and just talk about the fact that towards the end of last year, Council had been meeting repeatedly with the department and the Minister, and we did secure an agreement that the department would allow Council to prepare a master plan. So that was quite a step in the process. And the next step was agreement that there was a certain capacity of housing that was being provided under the LMR. So once we all agreed, the department and council, what was that number? Once we agreed upon it, we said we converted that to dwellings, and council is committed to, and we must provide that amount of dwellings. We know it's 4,700 for Mosman. So the master plan has to equal or surpass what was going to be provided under the LMR. So that's why we are committed to the 4,700 dwellings. But that's over. There's no time period for that. That's a foreseeable future. Now, what's included in a master plan? Many people might know about that, but if you don't, actually something that different disciplines, it's a very complicated puzzle. And it really is an evidence-based piece of work. So on the next slide, you'll see that there are many inputs into a master plan. And it's quite an iterative process because SJB, they're the lead consultants, but they will start doing the planning, but they'll have to refer to the heritage consultants, the economic consultants, the traffic consultants, to council. And with this sort of iterative puzzle, we work towards the best fit option. We also want to be aligned with government. We want to be aligned with what the Department of Planning are trying to do throughout New South Wales. We also are liaising with Transport for New South Wales, and we're reaching out to schools infrastructure because we want to be part of what's going on, but also have feedback into the planning that's being done on a regional level. So the next slide, this one here just shows we've got the master plan, but all these other expertise feeds into it. It is a complex piece of work. It does take time to do it properly, and that's what we're doing. So we've got Savills helping with economic feasibility, and Atlas Economic with the affordable housing, and SJB with urban design and with planning, and Archer Office on the civic precinct. We're also talking to SGS Infrastructure. They're doing a very detailed report to us on what are the future needs of infrastructure in Mosman for the population that will come there over the coming decades. So as I just suppose this is a very good slide to just demonstrate the depth of work that needs to go into it to make a quality master plan. It's also a rare chance for us to plan for some positive community outcomes. So as we look at the growing population, we also look at the community infrastructure needs. We also look at things like affordable housing. We also can aim to work towards things like healthy city objectives. So that can include things like active travel and also things like canopy targets. We're also looking at some of our key sites. What can those key sites be doing in terms of improved retail centres, improved connections, an improved experience for residents who might be using those retail centres? We also can embed sustainability all the way through the master plan, but that comes all the way down to the LEP and the DCP, the documents, the actual planning documents that will come later in the process. Okay, so just to talk about the steps in the process, the first two steps we've grayed out, but that involved the SJB team along with council looking at things to develop this sort of deep place understanding and how we're going to meet the housing capacity. So this work gets done before the options are developed up. Then we talked about the principles. So, we go back to the MOS plan, which was a document that the community had a large amount of input into, and that really does provide a guiding sort of point for all the work that Mosman Council does. And at this point, we also developed up the options, but that takes us to the step we are at now. So we're coming to the community with the principles. We think we've got them right based on many submissions and based on MOS plan and based on, what we've heard in the community, but we're really putting it to you. Did we get the principles right? Are there any that we're missing? Please let us know. And the options, we've looked at the master plan and we're putting two options to the community that we stand behind. The master planning team would be happy to go forward with either of those options, nuanced up as we go further through the process. The step 4, it's about looking at the consultation outcomes and coming up with a preferred option, and we put it to council for endorsement of that option. Once we've got a final package, we lodge it with the New South Wales government, so the Department of Planning, for gateway determination. That allows the second last step, which is exhibition of the final document. Then once we've got the community feedback from that exhibition, we finalise the master plan and then put it to the department for gazettal.
Yeah, I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Vivienne. Just a reminder, submit any questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your toolbar. We'll endeavour to get to your questions, as many of them as we can after the presentations. So now to present the draft master plan approach and options, I'd like to welcome Jonathan Knapp, Director with SJB.
Thanks very much, Jen. Thanks very much, Madam Mayor, and welcome everybody who's joined the webinar tonight. Appreciate you taking the time away from your dinner. And I'll probably spend the next sort of 20 to 30 minutes just going through the approach that we've taken thus far. Of course, noting these options that I'll go through is just a moment in time that is a sort of the precursor to the consultation, and certainly we welcome everybody's feedback over the coming weeks. As Vivienne's already outlined, the, I suppose, strategic planning moves made by the state government over the last several years have sometimes been quite blunt, and that's probably what we're all grappling with the low to medium rise controls in Mosman. But the low to medium rise controls are just, I suppose, one set of, I suppose, policy moves made by the state to address the housing needs of New South Wales. And what this quite busy diagram shows is, I suppose, the spread of studies that have been undertaken to deliver housing at some quite substantial scales, particularly looking at the TOD precincts, which refers to the transit-oriented development, which I suppose, as the name suggests, it generally focuses around metro corridors and heavy rail corridors. And you will have seen probably in the press what's been happening up on Ku-ring-gai with the 4 stations from Roseville to Gordon. And there's also other work happening in major centres, really big strategic planning moves to deliver tens of thousands of homes. And of course, as we've discussed earlier, Mosman has a role to play in addressing the housing needs of the state. We'll go to the next slide. As you'll start to see, this shows you, I suppose, the scale of housing or proposed housing change that has been captured in some of these policies. And our practice, SJB, and we're the urban design team, we have been involved in a number of these precincts. And so we bring a lot of experience in, I suppose, government's expectations, but also how to cater to the specific needs of a place, particularly a place like Mosman, which is incredibly unique in terms of its character, its urban form, its ecology, and local amenity. We were involved in Ku-ring-gai, who had been through a similar process where they took the very blunt planning controls proposed through the TOD, and they put forward a place-based set of planning controls which responded in that instance to the very specific needs of their 4 centres. And our approach to Mosman is similar insofar as we're looking to transform a very simple set of planning controls, which is quite spread quite thinly across the LGA, local government area, to something which responds to the unique characteristics of the place. And we've put forward 2 options which really try to address that. But you'll see the 4,700 dwellings within the context of other areas of Sydney. For example, Inner West has been going through their Fairer Futures process for a number of years to deliver over 30,000 dwellings. Next slide. This is, I suppose, a representation of the low to medium rise controls which are currently in place, and I suppose has driven almost an unprecedented level of development activity in your community. And of course, I'm following the newspaper and the social media coverage of these proposals as they come through. At the top left hand, you'll see the extent of coverage of the controls that address about 27% of your local government area, which is substantial, but also in the context of Mosman being a relatively small and contained local government area. So more than a quarter of your community, your urban environment, has been subjected to these controls. And the controls are put forward in a way that are purposefully blunt and not at all nuanced. And so this process that we're going through now with you, the community, and with council, is to provide that nuance and to respond to the specific needs of the place. And of course, you, the community, know the place better than anybody else. So it's really important that we do get community feedback throughout the consultation period. As Vivienne highlighted, the low to medium rise controls apply to the residentially zoned areas, and they sort of miss the hole in the donut, so which is the Military Road corridor. And that's the same in every centre. It doesn't address those commercial and town centre zoned areas. And so the opportunity is, through this master plan, is to be more comprehensive in the review of your centre, and also to capture the opportunity of change and renewal over generations to come. So 4,700 dwellings is a big number. But as Vivienne also highlighted, that's not going to happen tomorrow. That will happen in decades and decades to come. And so when we start talking about the infrastructure to support that growing community, that's not something that needs to be happening immediately, but certainly something we should be planning for in the future. Next slide. So the vision for Mosman, as you hopefully all agree, is to, whilst maintain that vibrant community that you all love, but is also to reflect its unique harbourside village character and its really special heritage and built form character, including the beautiful streets that make Mosman so special. And also through the change that will come in the future, ensure that it's safe for the community, that you are well connected from a public transport and pedestrian perspective, and you're all still proud of the Mosman that you know and love today. Next slide. So in shaping the very early thinking for the master plan, we identified with council these key principles, which we're coming back to time and time again as we're testing ideas for the master plan. And obviously right up the top is to really protect and enhance the character that makes Mosman so unique and so special. And that's been a really big driver for the options themselves. So we're looking to protect and move the development away from the conservation areas and really have close consideration for the heritage items. The low to medium rise controls are blanketed over conservation areas. And so similarly up in Ku-ring-gai, a lot of the work was done to pull the development away from those conservation areas to capture and retain the character of the place, which is so special. But of course, when you push things at the edge, it's got to go up. And so looking at some of the questions that are already coming through, that's a big factor that we're trying to manage. So the development doesn't just disappear, it needs to be reconfigured, and therefore the heights are popping up in areas where that character isn't so sensitive. And through this process, a lot of the design testing that Lulu, myself and the team are doing is looking to protect the amenity of the place. So how does this impact the places and the neighbours in terms of overshadowing, looking to provide additional open spaces, improve pedestrian comfort, and look at new connections that bind the community together. Noting that the Military Road corridor is obviously very heavily trafficked, as is the Spit Road. So how can we manage the relationship between the two sides of those roads and ensure that the communities that sit either side of that road corridor have equal access to amenity and open space. And through this, we want to ensure that we're, of course, bringing you on the journey, but of course, getting your feedback, as I mentioned before, as we go through those options. One of the other principles I'll go through later on talks about the street trees and the character and the landscaping that makes the place so unique and so special. And that's getting down to quite granular level in our design testing, but we're certainly thinking about how to hold on to the mature trees and the beautiful landscape streets that define the place. As Vivienne mentioned before, there's a consultant team looking at community infrastructure needs, which are all the things that we need to support a growing community, open space being a really critical one, but also other community centres and facilities. Of course, through all this, capturing affordable housing, and I would say affordable housing is different from social or public housing. Affordable housing in this context is for it's means tested based on people's salary, and it can be for key workers and other people who serve the community. Next slide. So representing some of these ideas spatially, these are the key design drivers that we've been working to and that have shaped the options that I'll go through shortly. Unlike the TODs, we haven't got a big train station where we can build a density and have a crescendo of height up towards. So rather we have a really strong public transport corridor, which we're looking to, I suppose, prioritise in terms of housing to get as many people as close to that public transport network as possible. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions and some thoughts around management of traffic in this precinct. And that's, of course, another separate study we'll be doing, and of course, an ongoing conversation with the state government. Noting that the low to medium rise controls, because there's such a blank set of planning controls, doesn't consider community infrastructure. It doesn't consider transport needs. It just puts the controls in place and assumes this would be, I suppose, addressed iteratively over time. Rather, we're trying to get on the front foot through this master plan to, I suppose, ease the tension on local traffic and try and put as many people near the existing bus services as we can. In terms of the strategic need for the community over time, like I mentioned before, getting the community facilities to support the community where they're going to be living in the future. Safeguard the views, both to and from Mosman, from the surrounding scenic areas. There's, of course, a very large scenic protection zone which runs along the foreshore, which we also have seen as, I suppose, a constraint or an area which we want to move development away from. And a really important one at the bottom right is this idea of transition of height. And in Ku-ring-gai and other centres, that is something which we have worked very, very closely on and over a very long period of time. And we're not saying that we've solved it today, but of course we seek your input as to the best way to deal with the transition of height and built form from the areas of change to the areas which aren't undergoing the same scale of change. Next slide. The top left, I suppose I mentioned it a number of times. We have both put a parameter over ourselves to, as best we can, protect the conservation areas and move development up and away, and where we are having development immediately adjacent to it, dealing with the transition in a sensitive manner, as we are with individual heritage items. The mature trees that define some of the beautiful streets of Mosman, we're looking to ensure their protection by moving development away from the street and provide more generous landscape setbacks in key streets. And of course, through all this, see this as an opportunity to really capture the vibrancy and the momentum that can come through change at this scale. And councils, of course, looking at their own civic precinct, whilst we're also looking more closely at the Spit Junction, which have been the subject to a number of studies over the years. And so we're revisiting some of that work and trying to capture that in our master plan moving forward. Next slide. So, as I probably alluded to already, we are looking to strengthen that military spit spine, which extends from the west up towards the north. And we're doing that through a number of different ways, both transitioning density and height up towards that spine, but also along its length. Of course, there's a big focus on the Mosman Spit Junction Gateway, and how we can use development to provide greater generosity to the pedestrian space at the street level, to improve the pedestrian experience, to improve crossings, and in some instances provide some additional public space. The transition at the edges is going to be really critical to how the community perceives this master plan and also manages the change in their neighbourhood over time. And I suppose use the opportunity of development to improve and strengthen the pedestrian network as a circuit, as a way it can navigate the spit and military spine through key junctions. And that's always going to be a challenge when you're dealing with incredibly busy roads, particularly roads that carry traffic from residents and commuters that live outside Mosman. So I suppose that's a burden that you have to carry. And so we are looking at the sort of one street back from military and spit and the spit to deal with improved pedestrian environments, to bring people away from that busy road corridor to beautiful green streets, which are much calmer and much safer, and encourage pedestrian movement towards and through the centre. Next slide. So this is a little bit granular to see, or a little bit hard to see at this scale, but of course we invite you to come to the various drop-in sessions that are going to be happening over the next few weeks to look at this in detail or download it and look at it in your own time. But what the story it's telling is we're looking to really fill in the hole that was left through the LMR, have areas of intensity in terms of height and scale as a way of bringing development in from the edges and deal with this transition to the neighbouring streets, which aren't going to go the same scale of change in a more sensitive way. And through this, link up with the existing open spaces through an improved network of pedestrian links and green connections. Next slide. So getting to the options. So the idea of low and wide and I suppose narrow and tall is something that we've been exploring on a number of different projects, including work with the Inner West in Marrickville and Dulwich Hill for a number of years, and it's a similar approach that we took with Ku-ring-gai. And it's not to say that either of these will be the ultimate approach that is taken. Rather, it's just a way of testing a series of ideas and, of course, seeking feedback from yourself. In the low and wide, we are, I suppose, pushing the 4,700 dwelling bucket of development, spreading over a slightly larger area, a lot less than what was proposed under the low to medium rise controls, as we'll show in a little bit of a graphic later on. And so we're looking to bring development broadly away from the conservation areas. We're trying to define the change by key streets like Arimba Avenue in the north, and of course, frame the development along the busy corridor and where the public transport and the services are along the Military Road and the Spit. And through that, we're looking at maximum heights up to 20 stories in around the Spit Junction, with between 9 and 15 stories at certain points along the corridor, and of course transitioning down away from the corridor to 5 and 8 stories, and then to 3 and 4 stories at the periphery. And then, of course, it would transition to the neighbouring areas where you have single and double story homes. So the idea being that the areas of no change will stay broadly as they are, and then we step to 3 and 4, 5 to 8, 9 to 15, and with a punctuation of height at the Spit Junction. I think that the devil's always in the detail with these types of diagrams, and of course we invite you to pass your commentary on through to council through the consultation period, where you have certain questions around transition, maybe particularly towards the east of the Spit, heading towards Balmoral, where there's still going to be, I suppose, quite a hard line between the 5 and 8 story zone and the area of no change further to the east. On the bottom left, we have just, I suppose, a number of, I suppose, precedent diagrams which talk to the scale of built form, certainly not presupposing what the architecture is going to be, but hopefully gives you an appreciation of the scale that is being envisaged for these areas identified on the plan. Next slide. So option 2 brings in the area of change even further. So I suppose we're really tightening up the extent of change, and of course the trade-off is it's going to go taller. We're still playing with the same volume, and I use like a water balloon as the analogy. If you squeeze the side, it's always going to pop up somewhere, and so it's always a challenge to work out the best place for height to manage the impacts in terms of overshadowing in particular to the streets and the surrounding properties. To manage the transition from those very tall buildings to the immediately surrounding properties as well. And transition becomes even more complicated the taller you go, but the trade-off is the extent of change, the areas that are going to undergo that planning change is going to be significantly reduced. And so that trade-off is something which we always need to carefully balance. And the potential is that the solution might be somewhere between option 1 and option 2, with other areas included, other areas excluded. So here we've looked to, I suppose, pull development even further away from conservation areas in some instances and focus a lot more intensity in and along the Military and Spit Road corridor. Still extending quite a long way north and still broadly staying within the same area around the centre. Buildings up to 26 and 28 stories are significant. I think in our conversations with Ku-ring-gai Council in a centre like Gordon, where the maximum building height there has been 8 stories for generations, they were happy to look at buildings up to 38 stories. And so that was, I suppose, accepted as a trade-off for the protection of their conservation areas in that particular centre. And that's really the feedback that we're seeking from the community is what is an acceptable trade-off? Where should density go, and what is the best way to manage the transition of height to the surrounding areas? Next slide. So this sequence of images, which should be a rolling animation, which doesn't seem to be, shows the, I suppose, changing extent of LMR to the options with a shadow of the former boundary. So we had a very clever animation, which was incredibly compelling before and looks a little bit stalled, but that's the way the game sometimes goes. So I will talk a little bit longer, but if it's not going to work, then we can probably move on. We're showing the comparative analysis between the low to medium rise and the two options and how the extent of change was being brought closer and closer and closer in. I think that's me done, Jen. You're on mute.
Thanks, Jonathan. So that brings us to the end of our presentations this evening, and now it's time to get into the Q&A. So I'll give Jonathan a moment to have a breath and a glass of water. As I said, we're going to go through the pre-submitted questions first tonight, and thank you to those people who took the time and effort to really consider those questions. Interestingly, a lot of your questions that we've been hearing a lot already through the consultation, so it will be good to cover off on those first. Just a reminder, if you'd like to submit additional questions, you can do through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you can't see that immediately, go to the More button with the 3 dots, click on that and you'll find the Q&A button. Okay, so let's get into it. Everybody ready? My first question is for you, Madam Mayor. We have been receiving quite a number of questions regarding the timing of the master plan. So can you talk about how long it's going to take for the master plan controls to come into effect?
Thanks, Jen. And as Vivienne mentioned, this is an incredibly complex process that we're going through. This sort of process would normally take 2 to 2.5 years. But that slide that Vivienne put up of all the different consultants working on all the different components, we've got them all working simultaneously so that we can expedite that process into about 8 months, which is extraordinary. And having SJB's expertise behind that, because they've done something similar at Ku-ring-gai, has given us that opportunity to really expedite that process. So we're more than halfway through the process, and this first consultation period is testament to that. So that's taken us just over halfway. So we should see, the finalisation of this process and the final master plan going out for consultation just in the next couple of months. And then we will have to work through the department to get that finalised and approved. So we're saying just a few months from now, we should be at the end point.
Thanks so much. So Vivienne, one for you. Will the master plan stop state significant development applications?
The LMR won't be switched off. If we're talking about LMR applications, the LMR policy will not be switched off. It will actually be retracted to the master plan area. So that's the answer to that. And as to SSD applications, the master plan can't stop those. They're under different legislation and they go to the department as a consent authority.
Thanks, Vivienne. We've had a number of similar questions. That's good to get that one answered. Another one for you, Vivienne. How will infrastructure needs be accommodated within the master plan?
Well, as I said before, we're doing a study with SGS looking at the social needs infrastructure. And what we find is once we've assessed what the need is of the future population, and we do stage that over the decades, we then go into our contributions plan and we can really plan in detail for the infrastructure that's needed for the coming population. So that's how the master plan will then, in a spatial sense, embed some of those new social infrastructure items.
Thank you. A question for you, Craig. What if the New South Wales government does not approve the master plan?
Oh, look, I think the ultimate decision is with the minister. So I don't want to preempt anything of the minister. Nothing's guaranteed. But what I can say is that we've been working quite collegially with the government and the department. As mentioned earlier by Vivienne, the Mayor secured an early meeting with the Minister, which I think was fundamental to the progress that we've made. We've discussed with the Department of Framework. We're working to that framework. We're regularly meeting with the department. So I suppose the comment there is that this is not a plan done in isolation. It's not a plan done and expected to be lobbed on the Minister's desk. So, the reality here is that council has been working collaboratively with the Minister's office. We've been engaging at several key milestones. So as Vivienne mentioned, we secured multiple steps along the process. The 4,700 homes was critical to that. So I think the government's shown us that they are willing to work with us. They've given undertakings that, they're meeting with our staff, giving us decision points. So we're really de-risking that process along the way. So to answer the question, again, it's the minister's decision at the end of the day, but I believe we're in a foundation that we should be able to secure success with the department, and the plan speaks for itself.
Thanks, Craig. So over to you, Jonathan. I hope you're recovered. How will heritage impacts be identified and managed?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So we have a consultant on board called MBRS, and the director in charge has spent many decades working for council, advising them on heritage matters. And with good fortune, they're working as part of the master plan team as well. And so they've been giving us advice on individual heritage conservation areas, HCAs, in and around the centre. And I suppose in many cases reaffirming their value and advising us on the best ways to manage the relationship between potential proposed new development and those heritage conservation areas. Noting that low to medium rise controls ignored conservation areas and had a blanket approach that, I suppose, in many cases sat over those conservation areas and ignored their unique characteristics.
Thanks, Jonathan. Question for you, Sarah. Will the council release the underlying research and documents upon which the new master plan is based?
It will. Council will need to prepare a planning proposal seeking to amend Council's local environmental plan, and those documents will form part of that planning proposal, which will be on public exhibition and everyone will be able to view.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. A question for you, Madam Mayor. Will the master plan provide for affordable housing?
Yes, in a simple answer, yes. Part of the process of the development of the master plan, we've employed Atlas Economics, who is helping us put together our affordable housing contribution scheme and policy, and that will this could include financial contributions from developers for us to purchase affordable housing units in other parts of Mosman, or it may be that we can negotiate with developers to have apartments appropriated for us to manage as affordable housing as part of the development in perpetuity. And that's a big component of it, that we want this affordable housing to stay affordable and stay in perpetuity within our community. We're also considering whether there's any council-owned sites that could be appropriate for affordable housing. So we'll be reviewing that as well as part of this process.
Fantastic. Thanks, Madam Mayor. There's been quite a few questions around affordable housing, so really good to start to talk about that. Another question for you, Jonathan. Another one that we've heard quite a lot about. So what considerations have been made for traffic and transport?
Oh, thanks, Jen. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think, as I mentioned earlier on in my part of the presentation, we're looking to focus development around the existing public transport corridors, noting that there's no big transport move to solve the challenges of the Spit and Military Road corridor. Although we do note there is a Northern Beaches network review currently underway, which is, I suppose, factoring where a lot of the source of the traffic is up on the Northern Beaches and moving through Mosman towards the CBD. And so it's definitely in the crosshairs of the state government to look at even trying to relieve some of that traffic congestion moving through Mosman. But I think as part of our master plan, we can only deal with the area within your local government area. And so we're doing what we can to reduce the need for people to drive within Mosman, but also manage the burden that you all carry in terms of the through traffic.
Could I just jump in, Jen, and add to that, if I could?
For
those of you who are not aware, the Northern Beaches Network Review is a review that was commissioned by the state government when the Northern Beaches Tunnel was cancelled and the metro that was supposed to run from Crow's Nest to Frenchs Forest was also cancelled at the same time. So they have commissioned this Northern Beaches Network review, which has recently gone out on community consultation. And if you haven't looked at it, I really want to encourage as many people as possible to have a look at it. It has an interactive map. You can click into the map and leave comments in the map. I think it's very, very important that the state government hears from the community. I met with the roads minister with our neighbouring mayors, a meeting that I organised just a few weeks ago, to really highlight the critical issue that we have around traffic and transport. It's probably our number one infrastructure challenge in Mosman is that traffic and transport. And the Northern Beaches Mayor was there, the North Sydney Mayor was there. It's very important that the state government hears from you what you see as the issues to get some long-term planning to solve this for us. Active transport's definitely one way that we need to start changing our mindset and thinking more about using public transport, using the B line. Hopefully we get more of those sorts of services. But this whole network review is really important to get community consultation and community feedback. So I encourage you all to have a look at that and put in your comments. Thank you. Thanks, Jen, for letting me jump in there.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for the additional information. That's fantastic. Vivienne, a question for you. When is it expected that detailed mapping will be provided to identify the extent of areas impacted under the proposed rezoning?
Thanks, Jen. Well, the detailed maps will occur. They'll be on exhibition after gateway approval, and we've got the finalised explanation of intended effects. So we put new draft maps up. We also put the new wording in the LEP, so any changes that are going in. And then the department gazettes it. So it's at that point where the detailed maps become public and become final.
Thank you. Jonathan, a question for you. We've had a few questions about the height transition, and I know you've touched on it in your presentation, but specifically, can you describe again how the gradual height transition will work, especially with the high and narrow option?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I think that the concept of height transition is probably less of a focus in the core, and it's probably more at the periphery, particularly adjacent to areas of residential neighbourhood which aren't undergoing change. So along the corridor, particularly along the spit towards the north, there are already a number of residential flat buildings through there, and there's a number of buildings even sitting one street back. In terms of the detailed modelling that we do, we look at the shadow impacts from potential buildings resulting from the draft controls or the draft options as we presented them to ensure they get adequate sunlight. And that's all part of the testing that we're going through the next phase. And I can see a number of questions associated with that. And so in New South Wales, some of you might be aware of the Apartment Design Guide, which I suppose provides, as it suggests, some guidance on how to deal with amenity, which is generally sunlight and overshadowing and privacy between residential developments. And so we use that as the basis for that testing. In and around the centre where the heights are greatest, I suppose the concept of transition is probably less sensitive because everyone's sharing in uplift with a much greater scale together. The more sensitive interface is really in relation to the conservation areas. And like I said, the areas at the periphery are not undergoing change.
Thanks, Jonathan. Craig, a question for you. Have council investigated the economic viability of different sites when allocating the floor space and heights in the master plan?
Thanks, Jen. Yes, to answer the question we have. And as I said earlier, this urban planning, design and master plan is not just one consultant. It's a multitude of consultants and disciplines. So we've retained an economic consultant, a property economic consultant under that Savills, and they're looking at key sites as well as sort of a broad brush economic look at the master plan, looking at things like tipping points and when the financial will stack up on certain sites, because overlaid on top of some of this stuff are affordable housing contributions, value that council's looking at getting out of the sites, open space. So we need to understand how that works. We can't put out an unrealistic plan. So we've retained the services Savills who are going over that in detail.
Thank you, Craig. Sarah, a question for you, back to the affordable housing conversation. Will the infill affordable housing bonus sit on top of the master plan heights?
That's something that we have specifically asked the department about, and they've indicated to us that yes, the 30% affordable housing bonus will sit on top of the heights in the master plan.
Thanks, Sarah. Over to you again, Jonathan. Are options 1 and option 2 firm within their boundaries and borders?
No, absolutely not. I think we, of course, are seeking feedback from everybody about where that line is drawn. Obviously, the low to medium rise control boundary was based on a series of catchments, 400, 800 metre catchments from the town centre zoned areas. And it creates a very sort of random, unsympathetic boundary of change. We're looking to, I suppose, look at natural boundaries. We've chosen Arimba Avenue as one. So, and other areas closer to conservation areas to our south as the extent of change. But that's certainly not fixed. But we are conscious of the best way to deliver the 4,700 dwellings. If it gets taken out of one area, it needs to go somewhere else. Like I said before, the discussion around density and height. But of course, we welcome comments and input as to people's thoughts on whether they want to be included or excluded and the rationale for that. So we're definitely open to it. And this is definitely the time to get your feedback into us. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, we'll share with you at the end how to provide your feedback. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Can I jump in again? Sorry to jump in. I just wanted to add to what Jonathan said is that, this is credit to Jonathan and his team. They've put together a 3D model that will be on display at the drop-in sessions tomorrow and on Saturday, I believe, at the Allan Border Oval Pavilion, where you can actually see the buildings' heights for both options 1 and 2 and without them, and you can actually move the pieces around. So I think that will be, for people like me that like to sort of see what that might look like, I think the 3D model at the drop-in sessions could be very helpful. So I encourage you to come and have a look at that if that would be helpful for you.
Yeah, it's actually excellent. And I think we can get that animation working for you now, Jonathan, while we're talking about the difference in the options. So Liana, are you able to play that for us now?
Yeah, it's going now, absolutely. So I'll wait until it loops back around to the beginning. So that's the low to medium rise extent. Of course, this is option 1 where we brought in lower and wide, and this high and narrow in the green. So that sequence shows how the extent of change is getting tighter and tighter. And then, of course, continuing with that tail up towards the north along the spit. So, I mean, on first glance, that extent of impact or extent of change proposed low to medium rise is quite considerable for a local government area of this size. And so it's always a balancing act about where that change should be focused. And we're not suggesting we've got it right the first time. But yeah, we have looked at, I suppose, natural boundaries such as key roads. Of course, your local government boundary to the west, areas of particular character and heritage value to the south. And then as the tail sort of heads north along the spit, looking at the current character and scale of development along that part of the road, and also how the topography sort of folds away from the ridge, and the best way to manage development through there. But of course, this is just one step in the process. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan and Lulu, for that. It's really helpful. So while we're talking about options, Vivienne, there's a question that's come through. Which option is council proposing to endorse?
Well, in fact, the 2 options we've put out to the community are 2 options that we can stand behind. As a council, we don't have a preferred option. We could go with either of those. We're waiting to see what the community prefer, and then we'll come up with the finalised option.
Great, thank you. Jonathan, have the current DA and SSD applications been factored into the master plan? Will new dwellings already approved under the LMR policy be included in the requirement to provide the 4,700 dwellings?
We have considered them in the number, in the bucket, but of course, because they're not determined, it's not like they're certain. We're aware of them, and we are factoring them into the master plan thinking. But 4,700 is a significant number, and that add up of the current DAs is, I suppose, a significant, well, relatively small proportion. So we do consider them as part of the master plan process, they will count towards that number, of course, over time.
Thanks,
if they're
Jonathan.
approved. Yeah.
Thank you. Sarah, a question for you. How will the master plan impact DAs that have already been lodged?
The controls that apply to a development application are the controls that apply when the application is lodged. So the master plan controls would only apply to development applications from the date that it comes into effect. Existing development applications in the system will apply under the rules that were in place when the application was submitted.
Thanks, Sarah. Another one for you, Jonathan. So will impacts of overshadowing be considered in the development of the master plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier that there's guidelines within the state, which makes arguably the residential quality or residential development quality in New South Wales is some of the best in the world because we have the apartment design guide in place. While it can sometimes feel a little bit onerous, for moments like this, for master plans, for individual development applications, it's a fantastic mechanism to ensure a baseline level of amenity for future residents who are going to be living in the developments, but also the properties that surround it. And so we use the rules, the guidelines, the objectives of that document to shape our master plan and to consider our built form testing. And as we mentioned earlier, all that built form testing, all that shadow analysis will be part of our urban design study, which will accompany the planning proposal, which ultimately goes to the change in the planning controls that Vivienne mentioned a little bit earlier. So it gets very granular, and we have a lot of very clever tools that enable us to do that testing in quick succession. So it hasn't formed our thinking to date. We didn't want to be spinning around massing models at this very early stage. We wanted to keep the conversation at a higher level, which I think is appropriate from where we are. But please rest assured that that detail is sitting behind our thinking and will absolutely inform where the master plan ultimately ends up with the planning controls.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. And while I have you, I have another one for you. And you've touched on this in your presentation already, but why are the Balmoral Slopes area protected, or why is the Balmoral Slopes area protected from nearby 6 to 8 story developments, while the Spit and Military Road corridors have 15 to 20 stories in their neighbourhood?
Yeah, I suppose it comes back to the principles of transit-oriented development and getting development around the transit corridor. And in the case of Mosman, we haven't got a train station to focus our energy around. So rather it's the Spit Military Road corridor as the key focus for density and height. And so, the development as, the LMR controls are pushing development down the Balmoral Slopes. The topography is very, very tricky in terms of pedestrian accessibility and connectivity, and so we wanted to get development up on the plateau of the road corridor to allow more people as they move into these new developments over time to be a shorter and more comfortable walk to services and public transport. So I suppose it's a very simple principle, but certainly something which we can test through the process. And the extent of development as it steps away from the Military Road corridor is, as best we could at this stage, captured in the two options.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Craig, a question for you. It's a little lengthy, so bear with me. Has Council considered that commercial properties and existing unit blocks along the Spit and Military Road may not be redeveloped for a long time due to long-term leases or other factors, while there's amalgamations of residential groups that might be prepared to sell, and they may have been excluded from uplift that could have incentivised redevelopment?
Thanks, Jen. My first comment to that would be, it is a long-term plan. So we're not planning for tomorrow. We're planning for the future. So I think where we've started was we put out a set of controls based on our understanding, based on our research, Jonathan's work, those consultants' reports I've told you about. So now is the point where we will get submissions from members of the public that can inform us in terms of our decision making. So we've put filters on how we've come to where we've got to. So we've looked at heritage layers, we've looked at development opportunities, potentials. I talked earlier about Savills and the tipping point. So we've factored in a lot as much as we can, as much as we think is feasible. But the opportunity's there now that public make their submissions. We'd love to hear from you. So, those will inform our future decision making.
Thanks, Craig. Vivienne, will there be more playgrounds provided in Mosman to allow for the children growing up in apartments with backyard play equipment?
As part of the community infrastructure review, we're definitely looking at things like pocket parks, local parks, and just seeing what's the distribution like throughout the LGA and what's it like in the areas that are probably going to experience the greatest amount of growth. So we're definitely considering that question, looking at it, and you'll note in the two options, we've already identified opportunities for pocket parks.
Thanks, Vivienne. Jonathan, how can we be assured that the master plan won't result in a small isolated lot next door?
Okay, yeah, that's so we look at site amalgamation patterns. So obviously getting a 6-story residential flat building on a single house is, in the case of Mosman, largely challenging because you need certain setbacks from your next door neighbours to deliver a residential flat building. And so part of that means you need a minimum lot frontage to get a building in there with a driveway, to get appropriate setbacks to your next door neighbours. And that means you'll need a certain number of properties amalgamated to deliver development. That will mean over time, some streets may undergo change, which might take a number of years. And so trying to limit that jarring relationship between the areas of the sites that have changed and those haven't is really that sensitive discussion I made about that delicate transition to areas of change and those which aren't changing. And that can happen in an individual street, but ideally we try to make that happen across streets as well. So it is the part of the renewal process. And you can see instances of that up and down the North Shore. It is the challenge that we'll have to grapple with. But I suppose the fundamental building blocks are set up in government policy and the Apartment Design Guide being a really useful tool to ensure that even if change is happening next door to your property, there's still an expectation that you secure amenity and privacy and sunlight, whether you undergo change or not. So it's a challenge, but I think this is something which needs to be grappled with by the community to deliver this scale of housing.
Thanks, Jonathan. Vivienne, how does the master plan propose to manage car parking demand for residents, visitors, and local businesses?
Well, we've certainly listened already to the community. Already in the sessions we've had, we've heard a bit about parking and traffic. So we do have traffic consultants on board in the master planning team. We will be considering things like parking rates, whether they need to be trimmed more or whether we can graduate them depending on how close the parking is to Military Road Transport Corridor. So we definitely will be considering in great detail parking and the consequential traffic.
Thanks, Vivienne. And Jonathan, back to you. We've heard a little bit about Arimba Road actually coming through quite a few questions. So this question is, why has the area to the north of Arimba Road been excluded from the options?
Yeah, Jen, it's the same as the Balmoral Slopes question. It's about proximity to services to major public transport, which being the main bus corridor. And it's also about a line needs to be drawn somewhere. And so from our perspective, we have chosen Arimba. If there are properties to the north who desperately want to be included that have they see as being value, it's something which we can investigate absolutely. But I think it's a challenge of having density away from the centre, away from services, and I suppose it sort of goes back to the principles of transit-oriented development, which is focus the density around the services that you have in Mosman today, and so. A boundary needs to be drawn. We used Arimba as a sort of a natural northern edge to our options.
Yeah, so let us know through the consultation if there is something else you'd like to see. Thanks, Jonathan. That moves us into your questions tonight. So we've had them coming in thick and fast. I'm sure the panelists are getting exhausted. We've had half an hour of questioning already. but your level of engagement is just fantastic. It's really an important plan. So let's get into it. My first question here, Craig, is going to be for you. Why haven't we been given an option to retain the LMR boundary as is under the housing SEP?
Oh, look, thanks, Jen. The council's resolved quite clearly that the LMR wasn't appropriate for Mosman. And that's, again, explained tonight through Vivienne's, it's a one-size-fits-all. It doesn't really look at place-made planning. So the councils, through their leadership, has resolved to look at a master plan. So to us, that's not the option. So the option moving forward, I think the majority of the community is clear behind the council in that regard, is that we need to do something. We've engaged consultants now to develop options. We can stand behind those options. They are a good outcome for Mosman, given the conditions and the sort of the constraints that the government has required of us. So I just want to be clear, the government has set some clear guardrails or clear boundaries that we must work within. And through the leadership of the council, these are the two options that we can stand behind.
Thanks, Craig. Vivienne, a question for you. Will there be a higher requirement for more affordable housing than the LMR housing plan?
The affordable housing policy will actually, there'll be quite a few nuanced affordable housing rates. It does get into a bit of a complicated sort of situation, but we're working through at the moment with Atlas, but we may have a certain affordable housing rate sort of for the LGA generally. We might have one for parts of the master plan area where there's quite a bit of uplift. And then on the significant sort of key sites where there's a big step uplift, once again, there might be a larger amount of affordable housing under council's own affordable housing policy and scheme.
Thanks, Vivienne. I think this is a question for you, Craig, but feel free to pass it to Vivienne. Is any other council doing a master plan?
Oh, look, I think we were one of the early proponents in this area. I think the community spoke very loudly. We did actually anticipate some concerns through the plan. We made strong submissions, so the council was very strong in their submissions against the LMR. We had some pre-consultation. We had a community events where we, at the art gallery, where we put to the community, this is coming. We believe there's going to be concerns in the community, and that was well packed out. I mean, we filled the art gallery, and that was before the LMR. As soon as the LMR dropped, we again had another, function at the Allen Border Oval. We had a webinar. So I think, we are being out in the front, very vocal. We are getting contacted by other councils now who share our concerns, and I'm sure you've seen the press, Eastern Suburbs Council, with their concerns. But I think we were early, acted early, but we acted prudently. So I'm aware that there were some council meetings where there was calls for council to do more sooner. And I think council showed quite good leadership, being making sure the decisions were made and made in the appropriate time, not in an emotional state. And I think the first step transfer that was the meeting with the minister, where we got a clear framework, and the mayor was able to understand and articulate then what the pathway was forward.
Thanks, Craig. Sarah, I'm going to throw this one to you. Would the minimum lot sizes of the LMR policy continue to apply?
So it is likely that the LMR will remain on in some areas of the master plan preferred option. In terms of minimum lot size, that will form part of the master plan. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but it is highly likely that there will be certain sites in the master plan area that will be subject to minimum lot sizes.
Thank you. Jonathan, the planning for some roads heights shows some inconsistencies. For example, a small block of up to 15 floors next to a drop down to 8 or less. Can you talk about how this was designed and how it's going to be aesthetically reasonable?
Yeah, it's probably wasn't caught on the key, but we've provided height ranges, so it's not a jarring jump between 8 and 15. It's actually a range of 5 to 8 to 9 to 15. So we're not trying to be too clever there, but we have sort of considered that as a relationship. So there might be an instance where the 8 might transition to 9 and then transition up to 15. And that's not to say that we're fixed at 15 as a number. It's an upper limit. So where we ultimately land on the height will be part of that further built form testing to address any of those jarring relationships that have been identified, either by the community or through our own work. And so, at this very early stage, we do use height ranges to give ourselves that space to manage those relationships.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to ask you this one, Vivienne, but it may be one for Jonathan, so feel free to throw it if it is. In terms of number of homes, are we limited to 1, 2, or 3 bedroom apartments? Because obviously in a 28-story building, we could achieve a higher number of homes if we could have more bedrooms, or less bedrooms, sorry.
Less bedrooms, yes, yeah. I mean, the number of bedrooms in an apartment can be partially shaped by the DCP changes that we'll bring in, and we probably will introduce a apartment mix. That is just because Mosman traditionally has really got more of the larger 3, 4 bedroom apartments, which is fine and can continue, but we probably need to bring on stream some 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. But the developers largely will propose the apartment mix that suits their building and suits their proposed purchases, I suppose. The council will have some guidance in the DCP to ensure we also capture the 1 and 2 bedroom apartments.
Thanks, Vivienne. Sarah, what happens when you reach the 4,700 dwellings? Is council going to be monitoring, and does then the master plan not apply?
So the master plan is a long-term strategic plan. It's going to plan for 4,700 dwellings, and we're anticipating that that will be delivered slowly over a long period of time. We're talking 20, 30 years. So that's a long way down the track where we'd actually, go over that number.
Thanks, Sarah. Jonathan, I'm going to throw this one to you again. It may not be fully for you, so just feel free to pass it on. So the master plan does contain lots that are heritage items. So will the master plan treat those lots as standard and therefore no restrictions to building over the top or buildings?
This is exactly why we have MBRS on board to provide us with design advice and heritage advice about individual heritage items that fall within the identified option boundaries. In some instances, they could be integrated into development. In other instances, it'd be providing an appropriate curtilage or, I suppose, setting for the item. But of course, each item is unique in its own way. And so as part of the next phase of our design, and most likely at the next layer of planning of the development control plan, there'll be particular approaches, very place-based, site-specific approaches to certain items. And again, I think this is the one massive advantage of going through a process like this, that you can be incredibly nuanced and very detailed in specific instances, rather than having to sit back and manage a blanket approach to every property that falls under the planning regime. So the low to medium rise, like I mentioned before, sits over conservation areas, but I suppose somewhat ignored heritage items, but didn't provide that layer of nuanced development control to manage the setting of specific items. So this is our chance to do that, and we certainly have the right team on board to provide us with that guidance.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jonathan. Vivienne, with an expected increase in pedestrians, can we expect better amenity for pedestrians and cyclists around Spit Junction, like wider footpaths and street trees?
Definitely. We're definitely working on that. That's part of the master plan and some of the technical reports. We really do want to take this opportunity to do some strategic planning, in particular for active travel. And it might take, a few years to come in, but there's a few cycle routes that you'll see will likely go into the master plan. I know the team have already discussed them. And we're also looking at some sort of green connections to improve active travel and pedestrian amenities, say walking between the schools, the village centre, retail, etc. So you'll see that sort of thread through the master plan. We're also looking at through-site links where we might be able to have a chance to get some through-site links where we couldn't before as properties develop. And that can sort of make paths of travel between some areas that are a little further from the centre and make them more direct and more interesting and more pedestrian friendly. And canopy targets will be included in the development control plan. Council, incidentally, has done some canopy mapping lately, so we can really work on that from an evidence base too.
And I should say, I should add the funding for that, we're looking to work with the infrastructure development plan, or the developer contribution plan, should I say. So as another key plank that Vivienne and her team working on is the developer contribution plan, which seeks to increase the levy imposed on some of these larger developments, particularly around Spit Junction. So that will actually fund some of these works we're looking at so that we have an income stream so we can actually deliver the infrastructure that comes with the increase in population and density.
Thanks, Craig. I have a question for you, so stay right where you are.
Certainly.
Council has specifically talked about maximising the usage of council sites like the depot, Stanton Road and the bowling club. Can you elaborate about your thinking for those sites?
Yes, certainly. I think for those who came to the council meeting a few months ago, I think council needs to play a part in this housing delivery. We can't be seen to have a housing target and not participate in it. So the thoughts are very early. I think I articulated in the public report that we need to look at our own sites. So, for me, the Civic Centre is the first cab off the rank. It can work harder. But with that, it can work harder for services and community infrastructure. So with proposed increasing housing on a site like the precinct site, with that will come a new library, with that will come new facilities for the community to service that increased population. With the depot, again, I think it's the onus is on council to look at its lazy assets. So I'm not looking to, go off and, I think I said at the council meeting, put for sale signs out of everywhere. It's really to look at the asset, make sure it's working for the master plan and for the community. And it's prudent to forward plan.
Thanks, Craig. And sort of related to some of that infrastructure, Vivienne, will there be additional schools? And do you have any idea where, if so?
Well, schools are a state government responsibility. However, we are going to be talking to schools infrastructure, so we're working hand in glove with them. They'll know what to expect in terms of population growth and can do their own forward planning.
Jonathan, one for you, again, around some of the difference between the options. So the low and wide option appears to manage height transitions more effectively, whereas the high and narrow option seems to dominate its surroundings, particularly the 16 to 20 stories near Mitchell Road or next to heritage conservation areas near Mandalong Road. Is there a reason for this?
Yes, there is. It's just trying to bring in that extent of change and where those jarring relationships exist. That's where we're going to probably be spending a lot more time over the next few weeks just to better understand those relationships. So absolutely, we appreciate the community bringing those instances to our attention. And I think in those instances, say for option 2, it's probably maybe leaning on the bottom end of the ranges that we've identified. If we feel like that is too jarring a relationship. So we appreciate the community drawing some of those instances to us.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Vivienne, so options 1 and 2 plans stop at the edge of the Mosman Council LGA boundary. So is there opportunity or does it make sense, therefore, to integrate with plans for adjoining council areas?
We do liaise with North Sydney Council to our west. We do speak to the officers there. We're actually having briefings with adjoining councils to let them know what Mosman's doing. As to whether the strategic planning cycles align, I can't really speak to that, but that sounds like a degree of difficulty that's pretty high. Having said that, North Sydney are also subject to the LMR, so some of their centres, for example, Cremorne, which straddles the boundary, will also be having an uplift and increase in density similar to Mosman.
And while I have you, Vivienne, another question for you. So the New South Wales government says it's aiming to achieve its housing targets under the LMR by 29. Why does Mosman Council keep saying this is a 30-year plan, therefore?
In fact, the dwelling target for 2029 is 500 dwellings. Now, as it happens, Mosman is outstripping its sort of curve to reach the 500 because we've had so many applications coming in. We're really going to reach our target before 2029. And that's the only target the state government has released to date. With the 4,700 is talking about dwelling capacity for Mosman LGA generally.
Sarah, I think this is a question for you. So how do you envisage commercial activation working further from Spit Junction with a whole bunch of new residences coming in? Presumably there's going to be a need for more cafes, gyms, restaurants, retail, etc.
That's something that SJB are definitely going to be helping us with. They've had a very close look at what exists there now, and we're obviously helping them to understand that as well. And we'll be looking very closely at what's appropriate in different locations. So obviously there you've got sections where there's some commercial, but then there's big stretches of purely residential as well. So that's something that we will be looking at. And one thing to note, obviously, ground floor apartments along those stretches can be somewhat problematic as well. So it may be the case that you might have ground, possibly first floor, non-residential uses, but then the remainder of the buildings being residential.
Thanks, Sarah. Vivienne, when do you expect to submit the master plan to the New South Wales?
We plan to submit in the coming months. The public will see it going up to council agenda for firstly to endorse an option and then for finalisation for submission to DeFi. So that is just in the coming months. So stay tuned.
Fantastic. Well, that has got us through the questions. It's almost an hour of Q&A already. I'm really grateful for all of those questions coming through, and thank you to our panelists. I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about how to have your say. We really do value your feedback. That's what this is for. It's to really inform you so that you can come and ask more questions and then provide feedback. If we were unable to get to any questions for whatever reason, or you had a site-specific question in particular, we do really encourage you to come to one of our 4 drop-in sessions that are starting from tomorrow. So the first drop-in session tomorrow is 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Allen Border Oval at the Pavilion. Then the next drop-in session, as you can see on the screen there, is Saturday the 9th of May, 1 till 4 p.m. And then we have 2 next week, one Tuesday evening, 4:30 to 7:30, and one Thursday evening, 4:30 to 7:30. You're also able to provide your feedback via our online survey, and there's a QR code up on the screen for you now. You can go to, or just Google even, Mosman Masterplan. It will go to the Your Say page, which will give you more information. There's a brochure there to download. There's the link to the survey. It will provide all the information about the drop-ins as well. Don't forget that the consultation period ends Tuesday, 19th of May, 2026. So please do your survey, email us, let us know what you're thinking before midnight on Tuesday, the 19th of May. We are on tight deadlines with this master plan, so we'll be looking at all of that feedback from you pretty quickly. We're going to pop on screen now a poll for you to complete to let us know if you felt like tonight's session was informative and useful for you as a format to receive information. And if everyone's happy, looks like we've still got no questions that have come through, which is great. I'm going to hand over to Madam Mayor now to close the session.
Great, thanks very much, Jen. One thing that just didn't get touched on tonight, I just wanted to bring to the attention of everyone watching, is that at the council meeting on Tuesday night, we brought a report on some urban planning work that we've been doing as an interim measure until the master plan is complete. And that is to look at how the built form of any of these developments that are coming through before the master plan is complete integrates with the existing buildings that are there. And there's some really good concepts in there. It's a consultant that we engaged very early in this process before we even started the master planning process. And that's going out to community consultation. So I'd like you to take a look at that when it comes out and just see if you have any more feedback on that, because that will help us in the interim until the master plan is complete to just help with setbacks, on the side, on the front, deep soil planting and those sorts of things that will help with that integration of the built form. So I also just wanted to say thank you very much to the amazing planning team. We've got incredible expertise, and I am bragging a bit, but I feel very proud of the team we have here at Mosman. Craig is our ex-director of planning and environment, and Vivienne comes to us with incredible expertise. And of course, Sarah is working incredibly hard along with the rest of the team on this process. It's a very tight timeline, and this staff is so committed to getting this timeline, sticking to this timeline and getting this master plan across the line in a successful way, in a very transparent way. We want the community to know we do not have a preference, and it is about we are genuinely, transparently wanting to hear from the community and come up with a plan that we can all accept and agree to. So please encourage everyone that is not even on the call tonight to take a look at the survey, come to a drop-in session and have a comment, have an opinion, because we need our community to shape its future. We know best what we need and what we want, and I really want to encourage as many people as possible to get involved in this process. I hope you've stayed online all this time, and thank you if you have, and you've found this valuable and interesting. But please drop into the sessions and find out more if you have specific questions and feedback that you'd like to ask. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you to all of our expertise and the very highly qualified consultants that we're using, including SJB. Thank you, Jonathan and Lulu, for joining us this evening.